Welcome to this Centremaps video. Today we're talking about SuDS reports, and we're lucky enough to have Martin with us from GeoSmart. So people are generally, I think, within the industry and the public as well, very aware of the dangers of flooding and probably very aware these days of seeing features on new housing estates and developments that are there to help capture water. But back to the beginning, SuDS features, Martin, what kind of process is put in place and what sort of problems are they looking to solve?
In the UK, people are very aware of sort of flooding that occurs around the country. The idea behind SuDS, which is sustainable drainage, is to try and slow down the movement of water. So instead of the historic situation we've built up around our urban areas, which is all around getting rid of the water as fast as possible into a drainage system and then out to the river, most normally. Now the approach is to try and hold on to that water as if we never built in the first place, and then manage that flow to help reduce flooding, both surface water flooding and river flooding as well.
What kind of conditions affect the choices people make about how they're going to handle a SuDS, what solutions they might put in place?
Yeah, I mean, the three main things that we would look at as a consultant are the physical constraints of the site, so literally how much space we've got to put things in. If we're in a central, London site, it's a terraced house or something, we might just have some space under the driveway if they've got one. There might be a small garden. The second one we're looking at is access to another water course. So if there's somewhere we can take the water out to a water course, that's great. And then also we're looking at the ground conditions. So what we call the permeability or the infiltration capacity of the soils and the rock, and whether or not we can put water into the ground, which would be our preferred approach if possible.
At GeoSmart, you've built some quite complex data sets around groundwater modelling that, again, also affect your flood models, which we'll come to in another video. But I guess, do you want to talk a little bit about what factors come into those groundwater models and how that impacts the infiltrations considerations?
Yes, that's right. So, I mean, we built a product called FloodSmart Analytics, which is a series of flood maps for the UK. There's 4 different key sources of flooding, which are surface water, river, tidal, and groundwater. And each of these can interact with each other, also are linked to the soil types and the rock types. So what we've done at GeoSmart is create national maps for infiltration capacity, which we call SD50, and also the opportunity for groundwater emergence, so groundwater flooding, which we call GW5.
Right.
So those are 2 products we use to help guide whether or not we might pick a certain type of sustainable drainage or not, just from a desk-based view rather than actually going to site and doing on-site testing.
Right. And do you go as far as considering previous use of the site and whether or not it's a good choice to be putting water into the ground, whether there might be contamination risks that to work around, or is that a separate?
So if we're on what will be deemed a contaminated site, so something where there's been chemical or fuel stored or used that's now left in the soils, that actually generally doesn't really move around very much. But if we start channeling water into that contamination through a soakaway feature, then there's an opportunity for us to mobilise that contamination elsewhere. But other sites that are just sort of crushed brick, concrete and tile, they're not really what we would call contaminants, so you might still be able to get away with the soakaway, but it is a little local authority dependent on that one.
What are the constraints as it stands on requiring, considering SuDS?
Yeah, I mean, it's still an evolving sector. So 5 years ago, most local authorities in the country would ask you to come up with some sort of strategy for how you'll manage surface water on your site as part of a planning submission. Which would simply be there's going to be this much runoff and this much volume of water created in a heavy rainfall event, and I'm going to put it here, and then I'm going to soak it into the ground or take it away. I'm going to put a flow control valve on a tank and let it go into the sewer. That would have been sufficient. But there's a new set of requirements coming in something called Schedule 3 of the Water Management Act, which requires all local authorities to see a detailed drainage design as part of any planning submission, which applies to anything from 2 or more properties or a construction area of 100 square metres or more. So that applies to quite a lot. That should have been in place at some point during 2024. As you say, we're in mid-2024 here. But I think with the requirements around biodiversity net gain, They'll probably push this into 2025 just to allow the planning sector some time to catch up, basically.
Yes.
But a detailed drainage design is a lot more than just the strategy document. It is how big will the soakaway be, what are the pipe sizes, what are the falls, what are the dimensions of chambers, materials, everything is required. And for some of the local authorities, that they're asking for it at a really early stage in the process as well. So this is a requirement in the future, but some local authorities have already made it a requirement. So for instance, Enfield in London have a lot of requirements basically around drainage, and they will already ask you for all this information. Then there's still other local authorities that won't ask you for anything at this stage.
So often, so many projects, so many different councils, it really helps that having that understanding of the likelihood of information being required in a different environment. It obviously varies from site to site, but that's one of the big benefits we found for our clients, where if they try and deal with it in-house, they perhaps just haven't dealt with a particular location and the constraints that are coming into place there.
I mean, one other thing I should just add is that what I've said there and talked about there is for minor applications. Any major application in planning terms has already needed to provide this information for a number of years. And this is also in England. So in Wales, it is already the case that you'd have to provide detailed drainage design as part of any submission. And Scotland, the regime is slightly different again. Yeah.
Very
For anyone who already has experience of developing sites in Wales, England is moving to exactly the same model.
Right. Brilliant. How early on are you seeing people looking for these reports, and what are they expecting from, and how far can those reports take them through the process?
Yeah, so there are effectively two stages to it. The strategy document, which for us we call SuDS, and then there's detailed design, which we call SuDS design. So there's two stages, and the strategy document is needed for a lot of sites these days, and people will ask us for them at pre-planning stage and submit that as part of pre-planning basically for feedback from the local authority. And then the detailed design is something that people will try to leave till a little bit later, because there's obviously costs associated with all these things, and you kind of want to be sure you're going to get planning permission before embarking down the process of spending money on consultants such as ourselves and everyone else. But some local authorities will still ask for that at the pre-planning stage as well. As a business, we sit on the SuDS steering committee, and we sort of try to advise on what's appropriate. And in our opinion, it's appropriate to have some strategy at a very early stage. So that's the SuDS, but the design work can come a bit later.
Yeah, anyone developing a site, it's still worth thinking about not too late in the process, the design, in case they have to rejig things to actually make it viable.
Absolutely, yeah. So there can be some implications on the design. So as part of our SuDS reports, we will calculate how much runoff there will be on the site. So we need some sort of layout already to work with, so we can work out how much impermeable area there will be and how much permeable area there will be. And then we can make recommendations about what will fit. Obviously, there could be topographical constraints, there could be constraints from other utilities, trees, whatever it might be. We would look at all of those and come up with something that works for the site. So we do need some information about the proposed layouts, but otherwise, as early as possible, it's a good idea to embark down that, because we will be making recommendations such as using permeable pavements, or rainwater harvesters, or it could be a storage tank in the ground, or it could be a soakaway, or sometimes we do green roofs, rain gardens. There's lots of options available to us, and those obviously affect the design.
Yeah, just emphasise that it does get to that practical implementation stage. Thanks, Miles. I think we've covered as much as we can about getting into sort of CPD level of information.
Absolutely.
If you want to get started with finding your SuDS report, you can come onto our interface and find your usual mapping and SuDS reports, flood reports, environmental reports there, or you're welcome to speak to us, send us site information and the challenges you're looking to solve on your sites.